I've spent a lot of time being obsessed about using engagement strategies to help business leaders and entrepreneurs retain key talent. And one of the things that I wanted to spend some time talking about today is this notion of employment engagement versus employment satisfaction. What is the difference? What does it mean? And how can we actually do that? Hi, everybody, and welcome to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm Shivani Gupta, and I'm your host. So let's look at the definition of what employment engagement actually is. Employment engagement is, that commitment, but more of that emotional commitment that an employee or that talent or that person has towards the business and towards the goals of the particular business. When our people are engaged, one of the things that they're really willing to do and they're really motivated to do is they want to put all of their best efforts in to be able to give people and go above and beyond what their role is. So they might be being asked to deliver that and they go above and beyond and deliver that. And they're what we would call the definition of an employee that's really engaged. When it comes to the definition of employee satisfaction, this is when we want to really reflect on, how happy or content that particular person or that particular talent and employee is within their business and also their job environment that they're in. This might look at various factors. So they might look at their pay or their compensation. They might look at the benefits that they get, maybe the flexibility that they get in the workplace. For example, they could work 1 or 2 days from home. It also looks at what their relationships are with a colleague. And so one of the things that's really important is when we get the definition right, then the way that we measure employment engagement versus employment satisfaction becomes really interesting as well. So let's look at what the focus of employment, the engagement is. Well, that means that when you look at the focus of employee engagement is that what they're doing is really looking at the active and the connection that they have with their work, with their business. And this looks at factors like their motivation. It looks like factors like their passion. It looks at their way and how much they desire to be part of that company's success and that business's success. However, when it comes to satisfaction, then one of the things that we're looking at is probably more of that passive state. When we look at employee satisfaction, we're looking at, for example, is the employee's needs and their expectations being met in terms of that? Because, for example, people can't be satisfied unless, if the employees aren't fully engaged with their work. So you kind of need one and the other, but the way that we measure it is really different. When we look at the outcomes, for example, when we get employee engagement, some of the outcomes we get for that, we get employees that are higher in productivity. So they produce more work than some of their colleagues. They are actually higher performance, which is different to productivity, is how quickly you can get something done. Your performance is, how much better and how effective they can actually get something done as well. That also leads always to the business's success. And for example, one of the things that the research shows is that when employees are more engaged, they're likely to be more innovative. They come up with better solutions, more outside of the box thinking, and they're a lot more proactive in terms of putting their hand up and actually saying, yes, I'd like to be involved in some of that. What are some of the outcomes when it comes to employee satisfaction? Well, their satisfaction may or may not relate to the high performance. For example, we can get an employee that is satisfied, but from a business perspective, they could still actually be disengaged. And so we might find that there's a lack of motivation or lack of effort or even lack of results that come out, but they're saying that they're actually satisfied in that. Now, how do we measure that? And again, businesses might be measuring that differently. Sometimes I come across businesses and they're measuring it exactly the same way. And I say to them, it's actually not always the same way. One of the things that we want to do is to be able to do that differently. So when we're measuring employee engagement, we will usually measure that through surveys. We will look at things like what their emotional connection might be. We look at their commitment about how they feel about their work. We look at how they feel about the business. And so we might measure things like, and we might have some questions that measure things around their involvement, their enthusiasm, their willingness, how much effort they're willing to actually invest and be able to put in. When it comes to employee satisfaction, again, we can assess that through surveys, but what we're doing is we're kind of really evaluating a different measure. We're evaluating what their contentment is with their specific job. So for example, we might be talking to them whether they feel that their appropriate remuneration or their pay or the benefits that they have, or the work environment that they live in, or the relationships that they have with perhaps their direct manager or supervisor, but also perhaps with their colleagues that they have. And what are the implications when it comes to retention? So again, let's break that down. What are the implications when it comes to implications around engagement? Well, when we've got high levels of engagement, we know that that's linked into employment retention. So the more the engaged person is, all the research shows us that they're more likely that we're going to retain them. We also know that they're going to stay with the business for longer. We also know that they're really interested in the business's success and the leaders in the success, making sure that they are successful as well as the business. When we look at the implications for retention when it comes to the satisfaction, like employment satisfaction, one of the things that we're trying to do there is that we are looking where the satisfaction is there. We know that the employees will want to stay in those particular positions, but that doesn't always guarantee the long-term retention. So if employees become, for example, dissatisfied, or they find that there's better opportunities elsewhere, or even though sometimes they're even being offered similar or a very small increase in pay, we'll find that they'll actually leave because they think that they're going to be more satisfied with that particular role. So when we're talking at both engagement and satisfaction, they're both really important in our businesses. It's really important when we're looking at retaining our key talent that we look at that. Engagement, in my experience, and some of the research that's come out talks about the fact that engagement will go in a lot deeper. Engagement will really look at, how we can get the employee and the person's commitment and their performance, whereas satisfaction starts to measure more around the job conditions and the things that are actually external, that are the support system to be able to support that particular employee as well. And when we're looking as business leaders and entrepreneurs in terms of improving and retaining our key talent, we want to look in both. But one of the things that really helps us looking specifically at strategies that can really foster and create more engagement, whilst still being able to measure and making sure that we've got some satisfied employees around us. This helps us create really great workplaces. I know so many businesses are now also looking at how they can create and become the employer choice place to work. And we need to look at how we measure both of those elements in order to be able to win those. Any questions that you have, please remember my business is called askshivani.com. And I look forward to your feedback. I look forward to your questions and any topics if you're ever interested in. Please pop that on our podcast page on askshivani.com. And we would love to be able to research, bring a guest on, or to be able to share some insight around that. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.